Welcome to our webinar, How to Navigate Supply Chain Disruptions and Remain Productive. Thank you all for attending. We have an exciting agenda for you today. We're going to cover the following. Disruption, some of the causes of the supply chain issues over the past several years. Reaction, how have supply chain managers responded to these disruptions? Pivot, how can we reshape our thinking about supply chain? What strategies have been employed? Transform. How should companies like yours navigate current and future supply chain disruptions? Foundation. What tools can a company use to make its supply chain more effective? We will have a question and answer section at the end, so please put your questions in the chat box to the right, and we will answer them after the presentation. But first, a little bit about us. We are Kwixand Solutions, a Microsoft Dynamics 365 partner and IT consultancy based in Canada. We guide businesses across the United States and Canada through all phases of their ERP, CRM, and cloud transformation. We have 20 plus years experience helping manufacturers and distributors streamline operations and optimize processes, resulting in improvements in our customers' bottom line and daily work life. For us, digital transformation is not just about implementing a solution to save trees, but helping you optimize your processes and maximizing your return on investment. We believe in providing value to our clients, and we've developed 2 fixed fee implementation methodologies to reduce your cost and reduce your risk, but more on those later. Now about the people speaking with you today. I'm John Rio, Regional Sales Manager at Kwixand Solutions. I have 20 years of sales experience in the enterprise resource planning area, acting as a trusted advisor to new and existing clients. My experience includes manufacturing, distribution, and service. I pride myself in matching my clients' needs to the best solution. And I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Peter Paquette, Implementation Specialist at Kwixand Solutions. Peter is a certified supply chain professional. He is certified in planning and inventory management and has over 30 years working in industry, lending his expertise in production planning, scheduling, and operations with extensive knowledge in global inventory management and distribution. Adapting focus on analysis to changing global and local industry markets to continue the flow of goods throughout the supply chain. And with that, over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, John. So in my over 30 years of working in supply chain management, we've seen a number of cataclysmic events, nuclear meltdowns, tsunami invasions, occupation, war, all sorts of things that have stopped or disrupted the supply chain. But over the past 2.5, 3 years, we've had this blast of successive disruptions, global pandemic and lockdowns, extreme weather events, all sorts of shipping disruptions, another war in Ukraine. And the effects of these have been felt globally, but they've also compounded to the next one. A lot of the effects were felt directly around the epicenter, but it also was felt further away from the epicenter in places where perhaps you wouldn't think that they would have linked. So over the past few years, the spotlight's turned to supply chain to really provide solutions as businesses have realized who can link all these things together. Some of the biggest gains for supply chain during this time have been that the media, the government, and the general public started to talk more about supply chain. And supply chain was able to share knowledge with the people around us about things like the bullwhip effect. Now, supply chain people, we just quietly went about our business, doing our supply chain things to keep the flow going. Companies with good people and good customers and good practices that had good tools were able to stay strong. Some of the effects that we've seen with acute disruptions were short-term and short-lived, but they carried a knock-on effect. A few years ago, panic buying caused a lot of stockouts on the retail shelves especially. Increased customer sensitivity to stockouts caused shipping delays, which in effect caused shortages to both retail and in the manufacturing sector. Now, the reduction of output of raw materials led a knock-on effect into that manufacturing. So it was slow to get things back to what we might consider normal. There was also increase in some chronic disruptions. So reduction or cancellation of customer orders, causing an overstock in some of the raw materials or unmanufactured goods. Freight and transit times and costs were increased. Another chronic disruption, thinking about the port of LA having many vessels waiting to be offloaded. Now, there's always short delays in different ports at different times throughout the world, but they haven't lasted as long as some of the disruptions have lasted in the past few years. Companies started to, look for local sources for materials and goods. In the past 10 years, we've, as supply chain managers, looked to offshore or further distance to get components or materials or manufactured goods. We used the term offshoring, and over the past few years, we've started to use the term onshoring or reshoring, where a lot of companies are looking to buy things more within their reach so they don't have to worry about the shipping disruptions. Decisions to redirect these resources for components or even finished goods have filled some needs, but in some cases have created long-term shortages in other places. The impact on supply chain managers in the business environment is that in the last 3 years, we've just been constantly fighting fires, one thing after the next, one disruption after the next, and very little time to recover or come up with a proactive plan to try to prevent that from happening again. Each disruption seemed to be larger than an industry or a region or the market. And we had many discussions in different supply chain events and collaborating in supply chain circles. But ultimately, supply chain managers were the ones that companies look for to try to stabilize the situation. So we turn to our supply chain tools, one of which is to increase safety stock. That always makes people feel comfortable, so that they know that they're going to have the material or the components to manufacture or distribute their products. Increasing safety stock also provides schedulers and production managers the ability to postpone production or postpone shipment of output. So that way customer orders can be planned to be shipped when they need them and not just when they're ordering them. Now, a lot of this was done using current ERP systems, and in some cases it was just using manually derived calculations. Another thing the supply chain managers were able to do was really identify the weakest links in their supply chains. In some cases, they were using many freight companies, so some supply chain managers shifted freight more to brokers for long distance hauls, so that they were dealing with one point of contact. There were also reduced the number of freight companies that they might deal with for local deliveries. Now, this is in effect for inbound and outbound freight. Some of the other things is that they would temporarily increase inventory on lower level items. What this could do is give the suppliers a chance to replenish their inventory. This also allowed the supply chain managers to not have to worry about those lower level items and give them the time to focus on critical items and sole source items. Supply chain managers were also able to work with operations to cross-train more workers and ensure that there was a continuous production. There were times, especially over the past few years, when there would be staffing shortages, and you might have one area of your production or distribution where it was either short-staffed or in some cases had no staff. One of the main things was that supply chain managers were able to identify and strengthen their relationships with their strategic partners. They could work with the partners to create new supply plans that went further out, especially for critical and long lead time items. Supply chain was able to recategorize or group some of the lower level items together to reduce transit time. And obviously that was going to increase safety stock in some areas, but at the same time, it would guarantee that they would a better guarantee that they would have the stock when they needed it. Another thing supply chain was proactive with at that point was to go to the sales and marketing group and get customer commitments that would provide a better strategic delivery. Get customer commitments that maybe went further out than they would normally factor in. And this allowed supply chain to focus more on what was important and not only to enhance what was urgent at the time. So supply chain managers really turn their resources to formulate proactive plans. Now, the biggest asset that any supply chain manager can have is information. Now, some of these inputs, most of these inputs, in fact, come from outside of supply chain. A supply chain really needs to know what we're making, how much we're making, and when the customers absolutely need the deliverable. So sales and marketing can provide that information. And supply chain needs to know where are the deliverables components, where are the raw material, the components that we need to manufacture or distribute this. So working with design or engineering, or even listening to the voice of the customer, you can get this information. Supply chain needs to know how to allocate these resources, the labor, the time, the space, connecting with management, HR, and finance. We can really figure out what the limits are for these resources, not necessarily the limitations. And supply chain needs to find out where are we going to get the material and how long is it going to take to receive it. Now that goes to the vendor supplier network and working with the strategic partners. And supply chain, ultimately, to get all this information together, needs to be able to monitor the movements and the transactions and the costs. Supply chain needs the right tools to be able to see these KPIs. Now, companies were, over the past few years, were forced to change from a constant output model to a more just-on-time planning. That doesn't mean just in time. That's a very different scenario, but something along this line. Now, this required a change in thought processes by all departments, including the vendors and the customers. Now, supply chain had to find ways and means to make this happen. How does this transformation work? How does it happen? Well, we need to build and maintain strategic partnerships. We need to provide leadership. We need to enable a digital supply chain integration. We need to create a robust risk management strategy. We need to build supply chain resilience. And we need to focus on sustainability. Building and maintaining a strategic partnership within your supply chain network is unequivocally the most important thing. We're not siloed. We can no longer be siloed. So we can't sit at our desk. We can't sit in our little area and try to figure things out. by ourselves. We need to rely on someone else to deliver information, because we've realized that we can't always rely on someone else to deliver the relief that we need. Even if we have multiple suppliers and multiple partners, at some point, as we've seen in the past few years, sometimes everybody can run out. And we need to have a plan. This is very different from the contemporary sales or procurement mentality, where it's always an I win mentality. You know, I get the best price, I get the best delivery, I get the best quality. These partnerships are with customers and suppliers, and it's a we-win scenario. So it's no longer about only getting the best deal for us, you know, the best price or the most profit, but it's also about how we can create and sustain that flow of business. A supply chain is one of the departments that interacts with every other department in a company. We interact with management, we interact with finance, human resources, operations, sales, administration, and outside the company, we interact with vendors and customers. So we really have to collect information and provide information from and to all of these areas. You know, we have to ask ourselves the question, how can we help suppliers be better suppliers? How can we help customers be better customers? The Association for Supply Chain Management recently released their top 10 trends in supply chain through extensive research and dialogue from companies and supply chain managers around the world. 6 of the 10 of this list relate to data, with the number one item at number one for the past 4 years. Data is quickly becoming an intellectual asset for companies that can be used to guide strategy. Increased accuracy and speed of data capture is of the utmost importance. You have your sales orders going to release production order, sales orders to planned production orders. Now, from this information, from the data that we can collect, we can derive actionable insight and adjust operations quickly when we need to. This intelligence provides visibility and it allows us to gain agility. Now, that's the agility to make changes with the ebb and flow of the market or the demand or what's going on in our particular industry or region. Now, we used to create reports manually, you know, using data that we would collect manually. Now there's better tools to create reports and dashboards that offer a great presentation, but the data continues to be collected manually because of poor integration. Companies spend money on the presentation, but not necessarily on how the data is being collected. Except that they do spend the money. It's just that it's a hidden cost using people hours instead of technology. Now, creating a robust risk management strategy. Now, this is also on the Association for Supply Chain Management's top 10 trends list. A supply chain, we've spent the last 20 years leaning everything out because the risk of disruption was so low. We were saving nickels and pennies everywhere that we could. Supply chains became very efficient, and even the large disruptions were manageable because they didn't happen in successive repetition as they have in the past few years. Now, because of that, a lot of the data was homogeneous and not really able to derive any real risk factors. Some data was micro-specific and related specifically to an industry or a region or a market. The strategy over the past few years has changed. The threats have not changed. The threats are still there. Now, one of the ways that a company manages risk is through a SWOT analysis. Companies that are willing to be proactive and constant will reduce risk. They'll provide the resources of time to research and gather intelligence. Using real-time data and the ability to monitor events in real time. Now, this will provide supply chain visibility, because not only will we be able to see what's going to happen downstream, but we can look and see what's happening upstream as well. And the upstream part is where a lot of the disruptions happen to the company that you work with, that you work for. Downstream is where your customers are. Now, they're as important, and you need to be able to give them solid answers. Part of the risk management is to manage your incidents, incident management, collaboration, that sort of thing. So one of the things that companies can do is to have a specific group within the company that's empowered with the resources and authority to execute plans when necessary. This is being proactive as opposed to being reactive. Now, you need to update those strategies as variables change. Now, if we take one step back to digital integration, having that information will allow you to update your strategies. You'll be able to see the changes in the variables and plug in those changes and run different scenarios. Now, this goes to resiliency. So supply chain resiliency. Resilience is the ability to rebound from the disruption or event. Standardization of deliverables and components in your manufacturing can be helpful. One of the questions we asked, and I mentioned this earlier, is the leaner the better, right? We spent the last 10 years leaning everything out. But what we realized is that we need to put buffers in place. We need to put buffers in place to guard against these disruptions that will allow the flow to continue even if there's a disruption. Now, we need to turn the focus from solely internal to include the external, right? Obtaining information and knowledge, not directly related to what we're doing, but in some partial direction or on a side note, will be able to help provide a solution by being part of the early warning system. Some part of the data will tell us that we need to look beyond the lines of our company or of our industry or of our region. Being resilient means that you're able to scale up when you need to, but also that you can scale down, and that you can do it in a manageable method that will enable you to manage the variable cost structure that you have set in place. Demand fluctuates, it changes, and you need to be able to change your output and your input to match your demand. Part of being resilient is to rationalize your inventory. We talked earlier about how supply chain was raising the safety stock levels, but ultimately you need to lower your safety stock levels back to where they need to be, but to a more manageable level, but also a correct level based on the variables that are happening right now, or what happens in 3 months. It depends on your lead time as well. If you rebalance your supply chain network, then you'll be able to look more globally and locally. You'll control where items come from, and you'll be able to control the critical inputs to your production. For instance, a sole source item or a single source item. And you'll be able to control how you're moving your components and your materials inbound and outbound. and can continue with the flow. You'll be able to streamline some of the processes in administration with inputs and reducing the number of errors. And you'll also be able to reduce the conflict sometimes that happens in a company's culture. You'll be able to put continuous improvement strategies back in place and not have to be fighting fires. Now, this cross-functional effort would be working throughout the workplace. It's an inclusive collaboration for all departments and areas. Now, sustainability is very important. What you need to ask yourself is, can you do in 10 years what you're doing today? The companies have consideration for not only their people, but also the planet. It's looking at what your people need in their lives and being able to provide that to them. To look at your community that the company operates within and be part of that community. It also includes planning to conduct business with companies that have or operate in stable economies and that have similar foundations to the company culture that you have. So who can help? What company can help you get to that point? Well, the foundation of any company's information is used to execute these plans. And the foundation of any of this information is the company's ERP system. In order to properly manage the volume and the velocity of business in the 21st century, a company must have an ERP system to meet its current needs and provide the scalability to grow and adjust. A properly implemented ERP system geared toward how the company operates in their industry, in their market, and in their community will provide a solid database from which it can extract the information needed to form the plans and scenarios that we've talked about here today. Now, a correctly implemented ERP system will allow supply chain managers the time that is required to address the risk, resilience, and sustainability factors that exist within the supply chain. Now, some companies are already using some form of ERP. Some have been using the same one for many years. The first course of action to evaluate any ERP that a company has is to perform a self-analysis. Ask yourself, is your ERP technology up to date? Is your ERP supported or is it out of support? What is the cost versus benefit of your ERP? Is your ERP on premises or is it cloud-based? If it's on premises, do you require any hardware upgrades? Is the velocity of your on-premises ERP adequate? Will it allow you to scale up? Does your ERP align with the company culture? And one other thing is, with your ERP, your current ERP, have you added apps or programs, or are you still using a number of different spreadsheets to validate your ERP? As important as choosing the correct ERP is to select a partner who will provide the correct implementation process and afterward build upon and continuously improve what your company receives from the system. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening to this portion of the webinar. And I'm going to give this back to John Rio to conclude our webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. That was excellent. Thanks for talking about the supply chain disruptions that have happened in the past few years and strategies companies can use to make their supply chains more effective. So in terms of a modern cloud-based ERP that can provide that foundation that Peter was talking about for an effective supply chain, we are specialists in Dynamics 365 Business Central. And as part of the entire Microsoft Cloud platform, it's an ideal way to begin your digital transformation by allowing you to unify that data, that all important data that Peter was talking about as well, the analytics, automate your processes, and collaborate both internally, but also with your customers and suppliers. Business Central streamlines your business processes to manage financials, sales, service, purchasing, of course, project management, customer relations, and operations all from one platform. And you can gain full visibility into your manufacturing and warehouse, full supply chain planning, as well as the ability to create automatic orders for assembly, purchases, transfers, and production. You can improve productivity and get more done with easy to create workflows, audit trails, and enterprise level security. You can connect workflows across sales and accounting to automatically track cash flow, secure purchasing, credit authorization, and vendor payment processes with predefined alerts and approval workflows. Sales and inventory forecasting. Get deep insight into your potential sales and a clear overview of expected stockouts by using the sales and inventory forecast extension. It uses the built-in Azure AI capabilities to generate reliable forecasts that make it easier to manage replenishment. And Microsoft Dynamics Business Central is tightly integrated with Microsoft Office Suite, allowing you to keep track of all interactions with your prospects, customers, and vendors. For example, you can create quotes, sales orders, purchase orders, and invoices all from within Outlook. You can add vendors to a team channel for easy communication with external vendors, and even translation is available. In the latest release of Business Central, you can even give your people a Teams license, with a Teams license, access to Business Central, even if they don't have a Business Central license. And everybody loves Excel. It's great when it's integrated. So you can send a list of data to Excel and even edit it in Excel and send it back into Business Central. Having this modern cloud ERP as your foundation to digital transformation will allow you to benefit from all the other parts of the Microsoft Cloud and expand your digital transformation with other Industry 4.0 technologies. So how we can help. As Peter said, it's important to have the right partner. It's not just the tools. We're a trusted Microsoft partner that specializes in Business Central and the Power Platform. And as I said earlier, we offer 2 fixed fee implementation methodologies to help you constrain costs and constrain risks. One is a quick start implementation. This is a lean fixed fee implementation designed for small businesses. We also have a 2-phase implementation methodology. The first phase of which is a deep dive into your company's processes and systems. Phase 2 is we take all those findings and we implement the solution based on a fixed cost and timeline. So what we're doing is we're taking the biggest risk out of ERP implementations, going over budget and taking longer than you thought. And in the phase 2, in the 2-phase implementation, there is no obligation to continue after phase 1. So the first phase generally takes 4 to 8 weeks to do the deep dive into your requirements. And at the end of that, you get a functional requirements document detailing all of your requirements so you know exactly what you're getting, a project plan and schedule, and a fixed fee proposal for the complete implementation to get you up and running. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's a quote from James Fiddler, Director of Finance and Business Systems at Escape Trailer. He says it's very rare to be part of a project that hasn't experienced some slippage in terms of cost and timeline. Kwixand Solutions were able to stick to both those quotes from the outset, right through the delivery, and that's rare, says James. I'm sure some of you unfortunately have the experience where you know that is rare. We provide a true business partnership with full support throughout each stage of your digital transformation journey that lasts long after go live. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you achieve your business objectives, send us an email at info@kwixand.com or visit us at kwixand.com. And thank you again for attending. We appreciate your time today. Now we'll take your questions. Please, if you haven't already, ask them in the chat box to the right. Thank you so much. All right, so question and answer time. Let's see what we have. Okay, from Anna, how can an ERP system prevent a supply chain disruption or solve an issue when it occurs? Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, no problem, John. Thank you. Thanks, Anna, for asking that question. There is no software that will be able to prevent any supply chain disruption. But using a variety of disjointed software will lower the resiliency of your company by slowing your reaction time. And what a modern ERP like Dynamics 365 Business Central can provide to your supply chain management team or your supply chain management committee are the tools they need to have better vision, to see disruptions quickly, and provide information to react in turn. This will enable your supply chain team to execute predetermined plans to minimize the disruption and get the supply chain up to full speed by using the information you've collected in your digitally integrated ERP, such as Dynamics 365 Business Central.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. And we have a question from David. You mentioned the importance of digital integration in relation to collecting and disseminating information. We already use accounting software to process transactions. How can an ERP system like Business Central be more effective?
David, that's a great question. Most companies have a system which includes accounting software to manage their day-to-day transactions, such as sales and purchasing, or they have other software or apps to record information like CRM, production management, warehousing, and the list goes on and on. An ERP like Dynamics 365 Business Central brings all of the company's information into a single database that allows secured access to analyze for things like patterns within time buckets, customer order frequency, vendor lead times, just to name a few. Without having to export information, many analysis can be performed within Dynamics 365 Business Central. Of course, because Dynamics 365 Business Central is a Microsoft product, like John mentioned earlier, the integration with Office and Power BI is fluid. And there are also many other apps available through AppSource directed towards specific industries or business categories.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Wait a few minutes to see if any more questions come through. And if you're like me, questions usually appear in my brain after the opportunity to ask them. So by all means, if you have any questions after the fact, you think of anything you'd like to know more about, you can either call us or email us at the numbers and email address on the screen. And there should be a pop-up to our website as well. There's you can go there. There's lots of free information, resources available to you. But please don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. And again, no more questions so far, but please do not hesitate to reach out, and hope to hear from you all soon. Thank you very much.